I'm also the host of Dr. America here on the WEAC Radio Network. And for our next segment, we're going to have a little bit of fun because Social Security just celebrated its 83rd birthday. And this is our birthday card to Social Security. And to help us celebrate, we have a very special guest, Nancy Altman, who is the chairman of the board of directors of the Pension Rights Center. And she is also the president of Social Security Works. She is author of a fantastic new book called The Truth About Social Security, The Founders' Words Refute Revisionist History, Zombie Lies, and Common Misunderstandings. So thank you very much, Nancy, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And the way that we're going to do this little birthday game is that Nancy is going to share some little-known facts about Social Security, and for each little-known fact, I'm going to put a sticker on the Social Security birthday card. So I'm going to, Nancy, you get to take it away. What's our first little-known fact about Social Security?
A little-known fact is that Social Security almost wasn't born. It passed the House and it passed the Senate, but there were insurance brokers who had been selling retirement annuities, and they thought their business was going to dry up. So they lobbied very hard in the Senate to say that if you had a comparable private pension, an employer offered a comparable private pension, you weren't part of Social Security. Now that would have made the program impossible and inadministrable. FDR really opposed it. The administration lobbied hard against it, but it nevertheless passed the Senate. They got to conference. The Senate said, we want it. The House said, no, it's got to go. The Senate, they both went back to their chambers for votes. The Senate said, stay firm. The House said, stay firm. So they put together a committee of staffers to try to work it out. And it became more and more complicated. What's a sham plan? What's comparable? And so forth. So they finally decided to pass Social Security as it is, but let the committee continue to work and bring it up the next year. So Social Security was enacted. The next year, the staffers went back to the members and said, okay, we're ready. What are we going to do? And they said, oh, don't worry. The insurance brokers came to us and said, we're selling more policies than we ever did. Before Social Security, people could not see any way that they could replace their enough income to retire. But now that they know there'll be Social Security, they're all in for retirement. So that is one little known fact.
Awesome. So I'm going to put this little pizza, and it's saying, you have a piece of my heart, just like Social Security has a piece of America's heart. That's great. So what's our next little known fact, Nancy?
Well, another little known fact is the way that Social Security, if you can imagine, this was 1935. They had the first contributions were to be made January 1, 1937. So it was passed August 35, January 37. They had to get this whole program up and running in just a little more than a year. This was before computers, before the internet, before even electric typewriters. There was nothing, and it is amazing that they were able to do it. What they did was they used the post office. The postal people then knew their letter carriers, and the Postal Service went around, helped people fill out their forms so they could get their Social Security numbers, and they were able to get it done. And there you go for another fact.
Awesome. So, it's actually really amazing when you consider how big and well-functioning Social Security is, and that it actually got started without any of our modern conveniences like the internet and all of that. So I'm going to put this sticker of an envelope because the Postal Service was so critical to the success of Social Security. And so that's our next little sticker. And what's our next little known fact, Nancy?
Well, as everyone knows, when you look at your Social Security card, which was actually designed by an artist in Albany in 1936, the same design. But as you know, it has 3 numbers, 2 numbers, 4 numbers. That's not just arbitrary. The reason it was set up that way, there's a whole interesting story behind it. If you can imagine the time before, as you say, computers and any of this, they found there were hundreds and thousands of people with the name Smith, Jones, Miller, Brown, these very common surnames. And of course, Social Security had to issue different numbers to each of them. There couldn't be any overlap. And they also had to be able to retrieve their records just very quickly every month when employers filed and so forth. So it was a very complicated system. It took up about an acre of space to have, because of course it was all paper files. There was no, as you say, there were no computers. Now forget the internet. There was not even any computers or hand calculators. So what they did was, instead of centralizing the numbers were given out geographically. And the first numbers, 001 to 049, were in New England. And then it worked its way south and west, and then the District of Columbia and the territories. So we still have those first three numbers show the geographical area. The next two numbers and the final four numbers were for the people who worked at Social Security to know where in that acre of filing cabinets to be able to find the file and be able to get it quickly and fill it out and return the information, log the information about people's earnings records. They got to the point where they could get someone's record in about 15 seconds. It was really remarkable.
Wow.
And there you go.
So no search engines involved, but they can get a record in 15 seconds. That's amazing. Just as amazing as this little toucan sticker. We're going to put this little toucan right here. All right. So what's our next little known fact about Social Security that we should all appreciate?
Well, actually, one of my favorite, and I think my funniest facts was also about these numbers. And that was the people who were in charge of administering Social Security went to the insurance companies to try to figure out a system to be able to do this, and found that the insurance companies were no help at all, but they recommended a consultant who could help them come up with this concept of these numbers. So after months and months of thought, this consultant called them all together very seriously, and he gave them this report, which was, this is impossible. You're going to have to go back to Congress and tell them to repeal the law because we can't administer it. Well, for good for us, the people in charge, the civil servants, said, no, that's not going to be an answer. Get back to work. And that's when they devised the system.
Interesting. So it just came together just like this little sticker of cookies and milk coming together. Awesome. I'm learning so much right now. I hope our audience is really enjoying this, because I feel like, just like everybody thinks they know Social Security, and then there's all these hidden Easter eggs of gems that you get from the history of it. And we're talking to Nancy Altman. She is the president of Social Security Works and author of the new book, The Truth About Social Security, The Founder's Words Refute Revisionist History, Zombie Lies, and Common Misunderstandings. Nancy, what's our next little-known fact about Social Security?
Well, and I want to really emphasize the point you just made, which is, again, that this was an enormous undertaking. It had never been done before on this scale, really anywhere. And so they were really breaking ground, and they were both bold visionaries in coming up with a program that still works so well today, but also in the nuts and bolts, they were very pragmatic as well as visionary. So here's another little known fact about this one. I'll give you one more fact about our Social Security numbers. And that is, as I mentioned, it's all geographically done, starting from the Northeast, working down. But interestingly, it's New Hampshire that's 001, not Maine. And there's a reason for this, even though there's a little tip of New Hampshire that's north of Maine. But basically, we think of Maine as being the northernmost part of New England. There was a John Wynant, who had been the governor of New Hampshire for 3 terms, very popular Republican governor, dashing, very handsome, was very progressive, was part of was appointed to help as the first chair of the Social Security Board. And in fact, he was appointed in 1935. He was so upset with the way Alf Landon and the Republicans were scaremongering about Social Security. It's really like, the Affordable Care Act and if you think about that, and the death panels, it was that kind of thing, that he tried to stay neutral, but finally he resigned his position, renounced being part of the Republican Party, and came out lobbying for Franklin Roosevelt and the Democratic Party, which of course won in a landslide. And they decided they wanted to reward him, since he was from New Hampshire, with the number 001010001, which is the very first Social Security number. But he was self-effacing. He said, no, I don't want that. So there was a woman in New Hampshire, Grace Otto, who was very energetic and got up early the first day you could apply for numbers, and applied. And so Grace Owens, and she has the distinction of having the very first Social Security number. So there's one more fun fact for you.
Oh, very cool. It's always great to hear the way that people used to, like, that people of different political stripes used to come together on principles. They came together the way that ketchup and mustard come together on our hot dogs. So that's what this sticker is going to be about here on the Happy Birthday Social Security birthday card. Okay.
Well, here's another fact that really is what my book is about, and why I went back and wrote The Truth About Social Security, because you hear so much, oh, they never intended this, oh, the program's so different, so much bigger than they expected. So I said, well, let's see what they actually said, what their words are. And what I discovered, and what you can if you read the book, because it has the excerpts, was that they had an extremely bold vision that goes well beyond what we think of today. Social Security in their minds was basic economic security. So in addition to the wage insurance that we have that's so crucial, they also thought it meant a good paying job. It meant, so you had to have minimum wage. You had to have housing, you had to have education, and you definitely had to have cradle to grave medical care. In fact, they almost proposed universal health insurance in 1935, but thought that it was too big a lift to do all of it at once. And so consequently, they left it, but they thought that it was going to be right around the corner. In fact, one of the the architects of it, and I will read her quote, gave a speech in 1938. They thought there should be paid medical leave because you'd lose your income, and also universal health insurance, Medicare for all. And in her speech, I love this, she said, adequate health protection may still be mostly pious hope, but it is not a vain hope. Both of these measures are already on the horizon. So she would have been surprised if she were alive today that we didn't already have Medicare for all.
And I think that that's actually the legacy of that context of that legacy is so important to recognize. And whenever I hear people say that, Democrats or progressives are moving too far to the left, I actually feel that we're moving back home. We're moving back to our original goals and missions and objectives. What brought us, to giving people the kind of peace of mind that they've come to expect from progressives. And so there goes another sticker for the birthday card.
Well, and I think that that's a really important point. I actually laugh when I hear that Medicare for all and expanding Social Security and lowering drug prices are too far to the left, because it is both the point you make that it's a return to their fundamental values and the values that have always infused the Democratic Party. But it's also something that if you look at the polling, 60, 70, 80% of the country favors expanding Social Security, Medicare for all, lowering drug prices. So if those are progressive proposals, then the entire country is progressive. And speaking of progress, let me give you one more fun fact, and that is the role of women in Social Security. Women had a leading role in Social Security. In fact, I would argue we wouldn't have Social Security if we didn't have these women involved. One, of course, was Frances Perkins, who was the first woman in any presidential cabinet in the history of the country. She was head of the Secretary of Labor. Heading the working group that put together the legislation was a woman by the name of Barbara Armstrong, who was the first female tenured law professor in the country. She was out of Berkeley Law School. She was also had a PhD in economics and taught both economics and law. So they were, without Social Security, we wouldn't have had them. And the woman I quoted was a woman, Molly Dewson, who was was a part of the 3-member board that ran Social Security. She was replaced by another woman, Ellen Woodward, who served until 1946 when it was transformed into a single commissioner, which is what we have today. So there you have it. When you think about Social Security, think about your moms and give thanks to them and to Social Security and to our gender.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We've got a little girl lizard here smiling about that fact. That's great. But I want to thank you, Nancy, for coming on the show and sharing all these amazing facts about Social Security. I definitely want to plug your book one more time. We've been talking to Nancy Altman. She's the president of Social Security Works and author of the new book, The Truth About Social Security, The Founders' Words Refute Revisionist History, Zombie Lies, and Common Misunderstandings. It's a fantastic read. I think that there's so much to learn about Social Security, and from understanding this history, we should be inspired to take on the next challenges and finish the job that the founders of Social Security envisioned for our country, and that is Medicare for all and all of the elements of peace of mind that come from good policymaking like Social Security. So thank you so much, Nancy, for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.